2017 was a great year for gaming, which saw the release of Horizon Zero Dawn, The Sexy Brutale, and probably some other stuff too. I don't really care about the rest of it, but as great as 2017 was, 2018 is shaping up to be even better. At least for indie games anyway. There are some truly phenomenal looking games slated for the next 12 months, and it being the new year, you know what that means. That's right baby, it's list video time. Oh yeah! Today we are going to be looking at 20 indie games coming in 2018 that I am the most excited about. Please feel free to rip me in the comments down below because your hate will drive traffic. Oh, it's an ingenious system really. We should be doing more list videos, huh? Anyway, number 20, Life is Strange Season 2. My history with the Life is Strange franchise has been a rocky one. When it first came out, I thought the original was one of the best games I ever played. The relationship has chilled over the years, primarily because I find the game's almost fetishistic pleasure in torturing main character Chloe Price to be somewhat disgusting. But also because I think it's 2017's prequel, Before the Storm, is just better. Of course, if you're a frequent reader of Cliqist.com, you may remember I posted an article trashing Before the Storm as unnecessary, looking poorly written, and badly acted. Well, it turns out I was as wrong as I possibly could be, except for maybe that last point at certain times. But because of this alone, I am going to give Season 2 a chance, which will feature an entirely new cast of characters and a new setting. Of course, Before the Storm was done by a different developer, and I'm still not sold on Dontnod as a developer, which is why it's only at number 20 on this list. Also, since it's being published by Square Enix, it doesn't technically count as an indie game, but it feels like one, you know, so I'm counting it. Number 19, House Flipper. Okay, stick with me here. I know it looks rough around the edges, to say the least, and I know it has a ridiculously boring premise. You buy crappy houses, and you have to repair and sell them for a profit. But something about this idea really connects with me, and I don't know why. I saw Many a True Nerd play through an early beta version, and again, it was extremely rough around the edges, but I saw a lot of potential there. This is a nice, calming, relaxing game, no elaborate story or anything like that, which is rare for me to like a game like this. You buy houses, decide how you're gonna fix, clean, improve them, and then you sell them on for money. That's it. It's simple, nice and cool, dude. But I really like the looks of this one. Number 18, The Gardens Between. This is a story-driven 2D platformer puzzler game in which you can move forward and backwards in time in a massive garden. That, coupled with the art style and music, is really all I needed to know. I love story-driven games, especially ones that explore themes of friendship and growing up, and I love doing so while being able to solve puzzles and travel through time, too. Huh, that sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? Number 17, Heaven Will Be Mine. This is one of those games I will never really be able to do it justice, so instead, I'm gonna read the description from their Indie Mega Booth page. Heaven Will Be Mine is a new visual novel about joyriding giant robots, kissing your enemies, and fighting gravity's pull from the creators of the queer cult horror game We Know the Devil. Follow 3 mecha pilots in the last days of alternate 1980 space program as they fight for humanity's future, or ditch their jobs to make out with each other instead. Experience the story from the perspective of 3 pilots bound by fate and gravity. Veteran ace Luna Terra, overwhelming super psychic Pluto, and hacker hijacker Saturn as they fight across 3 different factions over the course of an 8-day war. Win for idealism or lose for love, and grasp heaven in your hands. Number 16, Happy Hell. Kickstarted way back in February 15 to the tune of $14,000. And a little more. Anyone who knows anything about game development can tell you that that's not much, especially after you factor in taxes and Kickstarter's own cut. Still, developer Cult Games has been producing a steady stream of updates since then, showing off new videos and screenshots, and the game looks fantastic. As you can see, this is a trippy game. You play some kind of sausage-nosed demon creature, and you are indeed making all your jumps and falling down holes in hell. Look at this imagery. You've got a giant eyeball vomiting lava, some kind of round dragon with a spout for a nose, and a freaky melting candle thing. Everything we're seeing about Happy Hell looks fantastic, and I sincerely hope it continues the trend of great 3D platformers from 2017. Number 15. Dead in Vinland. Vinland, an unknown area likely located somewhere around the Gulf of St. Lawrence in Canada, is the name of the land in which Viking Leif Erikson visited when he was probably the first European to discover North America around 1000 AD. And that is roughly the plot behind Dead in Vinland. Oh no, sorry, you don't play Leif or his crew discovering the land. Oh no, you play as part of a group that's been exiled to die there. Yes, Dead in Vinland is yet another survival game, but unlike the hordes of endless clones, this one's a bit different. It's got a gorgeous 2D art style for one thing, but it's also a turn-based RPG, and it promises to have a decent narrative, which most of these survival games don't bother with. You can build up relationships, become leader of the group, make new friends, and fight enemies, all in a desperate effort to survive the harsh conditions of probably Canada. Number 14. Ghost of a Tale. I'm going to include games that are already in early access on this list because I can, and because I don't generally play early access games. Ghost of a Tale is actually an Indiegogo funded game, and as you can probably already see, it looks bloody fantastic. The production values alone make this one to keep an eye on, as even the best, most highly funded crowdfunded games tend to lack a certain level of polish. Beyond that, Ghost of a Tale is a stealth action RPG set in a world of dirty rats in which you play a cute little mouse. There's a big emphasis on dialogue in this game, allowing you to not only talk to friends and other characters along the way, but you'll also be able to talk to your enemies, perhaps even being able to talk them out of being hostile towards you. This is an incredibly ambitious looking game for a team of only 5 and less than $60,000 to work with, but so far it's been receiving stellar reviews. Number 13. Clive in Wrench. Clive in Wrench is a bit of a bittersweet and triumphant tale. Developer Rob Wass and his team Dinosaur Bytes tried to kickstart this beauty twice and failed both times. Admittedly, their first effort didn't look great as the game looked far too rough to showcase. But the second attempt a year later in 2015 was much improved, and even that looked not great compared to how the game looks today. To see the transformation this game has taken over the years, originally called Clive and the Stones, has been incredible, especially when you consider how they're doing all this out of their own pocket. I can easily see Clive and Wrench being 2018's A Hat in Time. Number 12. Long Gone Days. Not to be confused with the awful 7 The Days Long Gone, this is a 2D action visual novel RPG set in a dystopian war-torn future focusing on military unit comprised mostly of young teenage soldiers. You play as Rourke, who deserts this military after finding out some kind of dark secret they hold, and you have to guide him to safety. This will be done not only through visual novel and RPG sections, but also the occasional shooting sequences, with the promise of no grinding or random encounters. Don't let its pixel graphics fool you, this is an ambitious game. Not only does it combine multiple genres, but it's trying out a lot of new gameplay features as well. You'll need to find translators to interact with people from certain areas, keep your party morales high, otherwise they'll struggle in battle or might leave you, and a sniper mode that you can coordinate with your party to take targets out from a distance. Not to mention the story, which is tackling themes of child soldiers and corrupt governments. I have no idea if the first-time developer Burra, all the way from Chile, can pull it off, but we're going to find out quickly, as the game is slated for release early this year. Number 11. Heaven's Vault. Oh man, this is a very Christian-focused list, isn't it? Anyway, I don't know much about Heaven's Vault. Developer Inkle has been keeping their cards close to their chest with this one. But if that developer sounds familiar to you, that's because they're the folks behind 80 Days, a game I've been gushing about ever since I played it last year, and once again, that's all I need to know. I'm simple like that, I guess. The game seems like a somewhat difficult one to explain, but from my reading of it, it's sort of like a point-and-click adventure game with slightly less of a focus on interactive fiction than previous Inkle games. You play as Aliyah El Sara, I probably butchered that, an archaeologist exploring the nebula. You've got a little robot buddy, and a big part of the game seems to be about solving puzzles and trying to translate alien languages. only you don't do that through some silly minigame, you actually have to find clues and use good old-fashioned logic and common sense, and a little bit of guessing, to figure it out. Beyond that, I'm keeping this one a surprise for myself, and I suggest you do the same too. Number 10. Atom RPG. Atom RPG is another game that's pretty rough around the edges, and I have no idea if the developers will or even can soften them. This retro-inspired apocalyptic RPG needs a lot of work before it can compete with classic Fallout or Wasteland 3, which is set for next year. For a narrative-driven game, a lot of the text has been badly translated. Not Google Translate bad, not by a long shot, but still not great. Plus the animations are a bit meh, as are the graphics and a few other problems. Still, there is a solid foundation in place here, and if Atom Team continues to build and improve upon that foundation, then I don't doubt Atom RPG will be a truly great game. I certainly had more fun with its early access beta than I did with the finished Wasteland 2, I'll say that much at least. If you want to hear more about this game, why not check out our video previewing the early access version. Number 9. The Church in the Darkness. The Church in the Darkness is loosely based off of Jonestown, the religious cult that built an entire city in the middle of a Guyana jungle in 1973. A few years later, in November 1978, 909 people, including children, committed suicide, or were murdered in a cult ritual that also resulted in several hitmen from Jonestown killing multiple others, including U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan. It was the greatest loss of American life in a single deliberate act until the September 11, 2001 terror attacks. The Church in the Darkness doesn't make much effort to distance itself from those facts. It simply changes the name of the settlement, the religion, they're the collective justice mission here, and the name of the leader of the cult to Isaac Walker, and that's about it. Everything else is the same. It's still about a cult that created their own town in a South American jungle in the 1970s. You play as Vic, a former cop who infiltrates the town to try and get his nephew, Alex, out of there. What's really interesting is that the game lets you do this in several different ways. You can pretend to join the cult yourself, you can go Metal Gear on their ass and sneak around, quietly subduing guards, or you can just go in guns blazing and shoot everyone in the face. Number 8. Where the Water Tastes Like Wine. While I'm not as high on this narrative-driven folktale video game as others in the indie scene, I am still pretty interested in it. You can probably tell because it's number 8 on this list. I gotta admit, I'm not the biggest fan of the art style or the way the gameplay is pretty much just wandering from one conversation to the next, but it is those conversations that's the meat of the game, and that looks to be stellar. I'm still not 100% sure about what this game is, but I do know that you play a blues singer cursed to wander the southern United States forever, listening to and spreading stories from a wide variety of colorful characters. This game employs different writers for every character interaction, including several game journalists, which admittedly is probably why the interest is so high. I wasn't asked to write anything for the game, but I'm not bitter or anything. No, genuinely, I've used the word interesting to describe a game 6 times now in this script alone, and I'll probably do it again. I need to improve my vocabulary. Number 7. No Truce with the Furries. No Truce with the Furries looks like an interesting game. Much like with many games on this list, I'm making sure to keep myself in the dark as much as possible, which is doing great things for my career covering games, let me tell you. Presumably titled by our very own Nick Rubin, this odd little game is a police procedural RPG that is, say it with me, narrative-driven. The developers, the equally oddly named ZA/UM, Zayam, I don't know, have spoken about an inventory system for your thoughts, that dialogue is combat and combat is dialogue, and how those dialogue options play out on a computer film system. At its heart, it's a CSI show, with you and your partner trying to solve an open-ended case, and to do that, you play however you want. Good cop, bad cop, uninterested detective, it doesn't matter. Number 6. A Plague Tale: Innocence. Now we're getting to the really good stuff. You could arrange the order of the top 6, probably even top 7 picks on my list, and it wouldn't really matter very much. I mean, you could say that about the entire list, but whatever. A Plague Tale: Innocence debuted at E3 2017 with a cinematic trailer, a handful of details, and has since completely disappeared. The game is set in France during the Middle Ages, aka the Death Plague. The Death Plague, aka during the Black Plague. You play as 14-year-old Amicia, probably mispronounced that as well, and you have to guide her and her 5-year-old brother Hugo across the country to find your mother, who was captured by soldiers of the Inquisition, a military force determined to kill the plague by killing anyone they suspect is guilty of spreading it, which was mostly women, poor people, Jews, and people of color, if this game is going to follow history. Being those first two things, the Inquisition is coming after you, and since you're a child, you have to rely on stealth. That's right, a historical, stealth, narrative-driven game. Ugh, this is my jam, and it's orange. Actually, they make this marmalade. Number 5, Insurgency Sandstorm. New World Interactive, the developers behind Insurgency Sandstorm, have lost their goddamn minds. The up until now multiplayer-only Insurgency series' next game has a single-player campaign. Would you like to hear about it? You play as a woman who has escaped pretty much ISIS, who are using her as a sex slave, and has joined a rebel group in Iraq fighting against them. That's not a video game, that's an award-winning indie movie that nobody will ever watch. What is going on here? Frankly, this game has about a 90% chance to crash and burn in the most spectacular fashion imaginable, but just imagine that 10% chance where this game is actually brilliant. Oh, my fingers are crossed so hard I think they might snap off. Oh yeah, there's some multiplayer stuff too there, I guess, yeah. Number 4, The Return of the Obra Dinn. This is a Lucas Pope game. He made Papers, Please. The demo for this game from a few years ago was fantastic. What else do you want? Number 3, Y2K, a postmodern RPG. Y2K is a game I've had my eye on pretty much since it was announced. It's a whimsical yet creepy RPG heavily inspired by Earthbound and modern hipster culture set in the 1990s. You play as a dude who's returned home after many years away, only to find that not much has changed, except for a missing woman whom you've decided to track down. This adventure will take you to mysterious far-off lands, many of which filled with creepy and crazy imagery. But worry not, for you have your childhood friends there beside you. I think Y2K is kind of flying under the radar for a lot of people, which is a real shame. As well as the game, I've been keeping an eye on the developers, Axe Studios, for a while too, and they've been on one hell of a journey while making this game. You can read all about that over at Cliqist.com, where I interviewed Andrew Allison, one of the lead developers behind the game. Number 2, A Case of Distrust. You may find that the top 3 of my arbitrary list is filled with games you've never heard of. Hey, it's my job to talk about indie games, what did you expect? One of those games is A Case of Distrust, a pixel art, retro-inspired 2D platform. No, it's a historical, narrative-driven detective game, just kidding. You play as Phyllis Cadence Malone, a female detective in 1924 San Francisco who's on a yet unknown case. It's up to you to find evidence, suspects, and then interrogate them. Interrogate the suspects. You do so mostly through text, as this is a proto-text-based visual novel, but it's unlike one you've ever seen before. This game has its own unique style, with bold dialogue up front in the center of the screen next to each character's silhouettes. You'll also be searching environments for clues, as well as making crucial decisions about your case. Again, I spoke to developer The Wandering Ben over at Cliqist.com if you want to read more about him or the game itself. He told me he took a lot of inspiration from classic noir detective novels and writers, such as Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler. You rarely see a woman taking the role of protagonist in these stories, especially as a detective, so I look forward to seeing how this plays out. Number 1, The Occupation. Okay, now this is a 2D pixel art platformer inspired by retro... I'm lying again, this is another historical narrative-driven mystery game. In The Occupation, you play as a whistleblowing journalist in 1980s England, 4 hours before the passing of the Union Act. This act will essentially give the government free rein to spy on its citizens. It was proposed after a terrorist attack left many dead, but our main character believes the attack was an inside job or even a hoax, and is on a mission to find out what really happened and stop the act from passing. And you know how I said it takes place 4 hours before the bill passes? That's not just a story thing, that's a real ticking clock. You have 4 real-life hours to gather all the evidence you can and get it to the public. As the developers say, 1 minute in the real world is 1 minute in the game. So you might miss key events simply because you weren't there to see them happening. There are a lot of layers going on here, and I'm keen to see if White Paper Games can keep all those plates spinning. Ha! There! I didn't say interesting in this entire entry. Take that, Where the Water Tastes Like Shit, or whatever your title is. Ha 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 ha!